Back on. Dr. Kogan, you should be able to speak.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much for letting me talk. Just a 2 minutes, 60 seconds introduction. I am a physician. I'm associate professor of medicine at George Washington University. I'm a medical director of the Center for Integrative Medicine here at George Washington University, as well as associate director of the several fellowship programs, including geriatrics and palliative care. I've been in practice since 2007. I've been one of the early adopters of medical cannabis in District of Columbia. At this point, I recommended it for over 3,000 patients, as well as in Maryland and Virginia. So I know quite a bit about the topic. I am kind of a to-go person at George Washington University for most of the referrals, as well as I am the one who chairing the committee at the hospital use, nursing home, and other utilization of the medical cannabis in our institution. In addition, I am a member of the board at Doctors for Cannabis Regulation. I teach extensively on this topic internationally, and we're developing several courses. We're also setting up several randomized trials in partnership with industry, more specifically for pain, since this is my main interest. So specifically, I was asked to talk about high potency, non-inhaled products, edibles, etc., recreational versus medical. Well, first of all, let me point out that I do have a number of patients in my practice who have been heavy users, who have transitioned from recreational to medical, in hundreds, if not in thousands of patients. And I'm extremely comfortable kind of navigating the realm between recreational to medical, especially when there has been a history of cannabis abuse in the past, or dependence rather than abuse. So my take on this is following two lines. So line number one is the safety. I think that trying to regulate dosing percentages and safety is completely irrelevant and not physically possible, and it's just waste of time and effort. I feel that way more important to concentrate on clear labeling, on child protecting bottling, as well as assuring of the quality. I was extremely pleased to hear how committee is trying to, I was actually listening until 2:30 when I had a patient. I'm sorry, I had to leave. I'm covering hospital. We had an emergency meeting. So it was really good to see that you're setting up a very high grade testing facilities to make sure, and I hope that that will go not just for medical, but for recreational as well. And in my opinion, the testing of recreational and medical should be exactly the same. They should not be only tested for active ingredients. They have to be tested for contaminants, especially for mold. As you all probably heard, there have been deaths associated with the mold toxicity in legal recommendations, not in illegal. So that's a big significant issue. And unfortunately, a lot of the times recreational products are not tested because the testing for contaminants is much more expensive than just for active ingredients. We're talking about hundreds of dollars versus, $50. It's a significant difference. In terms of the reason I mentioned that I don't believe that the potency percentages and dosages, well, first of all, there's no data to support to say something that very high dose of THC in one setting is going to be associated with any significant long-term problems. For example, the prior speaker was discussing only evidence on inhaled forms. There's no such evidence that oral cannabinoids are linked to the schizophrenia. It doesn't exist. Unfortunately, our evidence only comes from recreational field. We simply have no idea what medical field is doing. As you all, of course, know, most of the products nowadays separated in three categories. Category 1, which is a predominant THC, category 2, which is a predominant CBD, and then what's called an equivalent or equal ratio of CBD and THC. So it's not very clear if I give a patient, say, 50 milligrams of THC in combination with 50 milligrams of CBD at bedtime for prolonged time. In my experience, hundreds, if not thousands of my patients are on such doses with no consequences whatsoever. Now, will the science prove that? I don't know. In clinical practice, we see side effects from 1 milligram and we see side effects from 100 milligrams and everywhere in between. And I have right now in the hospital patient who was admitted for, overdose of narcotics in combination with gabapentin, 84-year-old woman for whom Pain Clinic has been pushing Neurontin gabapentin to a dose, which when I saw the patient, I was like, oh my God, why didn't this provider discuss the cannabis use? Because clearly patient would not have ended up in a hospital in this situation. And thank God patient is okay because we intervened early. But in our area, just like sounds like in New Jersey, there are lots of times when that intervention is too late and the patient dies from opioid overdose.
Hey,
So
Dr. Kogan, just note 5 minutes are up. So a couple more points and then want to have time for the commissioners to ask any questions.
yeah, so I would say that if somebody wants to recreationally take very high dose, whether you have 5 milligrams, 25 milligrams, or 50 milligrams, they'll find their way to do it. They'll simply take more. The same goes for percentage in smokable products. I believe it's the same way. I think if you want to specifically, I already discussed what I think is the real big safety points. Now, I'm not necessarily saying all the products should be allowed. I think in terms of recreational, that is to be determined, of course, by your committee. But I'm just basically saying that in reality, in real practice, and what I'm seeing, that's just not how the real world works. People will, when I say start low, titrate up, and deliver where it needs to go, most people do listen to this. And if we provide correct education to general public, I believe the same will happen with recreational use. And I'll stop here and I'll take questions.
Thank you, Dr. Kogan. I'll start with the questions and then leave room for my fellow commissioners to jump in. You said that you referred to Dr. Carlini's research about focusing on inhaled products. Are you aware of any data that suggests that non-inhaled products would result in different outcomes that were studied?
No, I'm not, but I also aware that such studies need to be done. They simply have not been done. We believe that there will be increased risk of schizophrenia. It's probably true, but it hasn't been done. And moreover, definitely all the prior studies were done with THC alone. We simply don't know if you start adding CBD to the mix. We do believe the risk will go down. It is a theoretical statement what I'm making. I don't think it's backed up by a science.
Okay, thank you.
And by the way, I make it very clear, I did not bring, everything I said should not be applied to inhaled products. I'm only discussing non-inhaled because I was specifically asked to discuss that. I almost never prescribe inhaled products. Many of my patients use it, but that's not where I start anybody on, just as a disclaimer.
Thank you. Any other questions from the commissioners for Dr. Kogan? Vice Chair Delgado, you are on mute.
Yeah, I have a question, Dr. Mikhail. You speak to clear labeling and childproofing the product.
Mm-hmm.
Can you point or can you recommend any resources out there that the commission can view?
Yeah, absolutely. If you contact Doctors for Cannabis Regulation, one of our funders has created a standard, which I believe should be mandated by every state. Now, of course, I'm not a politician, so I can't speak what if different states pick up different standards. But reality is that there are several standards out there, and definitely the one that I like the most is by Doctors for Cannabis Regulation. So it does exist, and if it's done right and if it's clear and if every dispensary following the standard, I think it'll dramatically. Let me give you a simple example. Patients often clueless, the THC percentages. They're simply going to pick up whatever they're given, and often labels don't even have a clear mark saying THC is there, or it's unfortunately all over the place from what we're seeing. And since I see patients in 3 different states, I also have to deal with 3 different labeling systems in essence. And then on top of that, a lot of people go to other states and then bring the products from recreational, even though of course I will tell them not to do it, but it's a free market. So, and then of course those labels also different. And childproof, I think it's a pretty standard technology, it's same as with pills with all the pharmacies. So I believe that's already in place, just needs to be followed.
Thank you, Doctor.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions from the commissioners? Hearing none, thank you very much, Dr. Kogan, for your time and your comments today.